Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, protest music, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well for IS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm going pretty well, and I
Glad
know
to
it's
hear it.
been a while. I know it's been a while since I've done a video essay, but I have recently brought one out, and I thought we would.
Long time between drinks for IS. Long
Yeah,
time.
I thought we would go into what I kind of covered in my video essay, or at least also what I'm going to cover in part two, because
Yeah.
um,
It's a very
yeah,
complex topic, can I just say? Not for
oh,
the faint-hearted. Like you have to be a
no,
philosophy student, at least, with a background in philosophy to understand what's going on. So,
yes, I guess if you kind of deep dive into what we w're talking about, that is the case. But I
mm,
kind of feel like the broad revolutionary lessons, which is really what this podcast is all about.
mm,
Once you kind of delve into that, I feel like it's a fairly, I wouldn't say straightforward message, but it's a, a message that revolutionaries should
well,
take on
let's
board.
let's dive in, like, deep end sort of stuff here. Off the bat, let's
Yeah.
not muck around for AS. What
Okay.
is the revolutionary? Like, look, let me just say this. Everybody go out. It's 15 minutes of your life. You won't be sorry. Just watch the video and then come back and listen to this. So, what is the revolutionary lesson from this video? Because, like I said, it seemed like a very philosophical, like heavy episode, like dealing with some large concepts that have been, debated for thousands of years now, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So, like, it's not like you could just digest all of that in 15 minutes and walk away, knowing all. So, like, in saying all of that, well, yeah, what is the revolutionary takeaway there? Because that's what I was the most interested when I was sitting there watching the
Hmm.
video. I was trying to analyze it for what the takeaway was for someone like me.
Okay. Well, s- certain aspects of that will be covered in part two, which is called normalization. But let me just uh, grind it down into two
Please,
words:
please.
problematicity and normalization. Because the thing
Mm,
is, when I went to Prague with my partner, like in October last year, she got me this book by Vaclav Havel, which he was the first Czech Republic president. So this was after the fall of the Soviet Union, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and basically the progressive movement that happened in the Czech Republic, which was the Revolution, where it was a
mm,
very peaceful revolution. But what you have to take into consideration is like the Czech Republic, in terms of history, is a massive melting pot.
yeah,
So, I make the comments like early in the video essay that um, they were control. One of the regimes that was in control of Prague uh, was the German Nazi Party, and
mm,
the Jewish quarter in Prague itself. It was pristinely kept because Hitler wanted it to be a monument to the dead Jewish race.
yeah,
Like it's got a very harrowing history. And
yeah,
what's interesting about it, and you know, what Jan Padoka talks about in like his ideas of the concept of man and amplitude, like that's the thing about philosophers is they like to create their own words and their own meanings behind words
yeah,
and shoot forward. At least those in phenomenology, but
yeah.
his
But what
work
is the
is
word
kind of
again? What's the word? How do you say it? Problematicity, is it?
problematicity.
Problematicity.
Yes. And now I'm getting to the crux of that is that these people and also the philosophical circle that Jan Padoka was a part of. Uh, these people were hiding people from the Nazis. They were hiding people from the Soviet Union that spoke out against them. Um, uh, Vaclav Havel was the leader of the Solidarity of the Shaken, which were people that were speaking out against the Soviet Union. And because this was such a melting plot, they were used to a dissonant mindset or a resistance mindset, where that's the reason why Jan Padoka created this word problematicity. Is that, well, whenever we've found ourselves in liberalism, Nazism, um, uh, Stalinism, because that's, at that point, especially in the 1970s leading into the 1980s, for Jan Padoka as well as Vaclav Havel, uh, it was more that you had the people that were reinforcing the ideology rather than the ideology that was reinforcing the people. So
Yeah.
people were seeing the downside to these regimes rather than the upsides.
Yes.
And the problematicity of it was, hey, let's look at the dialectics of this situation, or the flaws of this situation, where we have to see what we should resist and what people have to resist in
Yeah.
order to fulfill their life.
Right. Look, I still don't understand what the meaning of problematicity is. So could you just hone in really specifically on that? Like, imagine I'm 12. I might be. You never know.
Yeah.
Imagine I'm 12 and explain it to me like I'm a child.
Okay. Well, the best way to kind of describe it is going into, like, putting to the side, such as the broad studies of who he studied under, which was Husserl and Heidegger, like everything in terms of um, Descartes uh, with metaphysics as well as phenomenology. Just kind of put that to the side.
Yeah.
His main thing with the idea of problematicity is, hey, we're being repressed by this regime. I
Hmm.
want I want to set up a system of dialectics. So, seeing what the ideology says and seeing what is coming out in practice. So
Yeah.
the best way to kind of view that is, I'll borrow some concepts from Vaclav Havel with The Power of the Powerless. He talks about he uses this analogy of, you have a greengrocer and he has in his shop, workers of the world unite. So obviously, we know that this is a very common Marx and Engels term from the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah, it's a
But
communist phrase. That is. Yeah.
yes, but the thing though is,
Mm.
as Vaclav Havel says in The Power of the Palace, is that um, the reason why Workers of the World Unite is in his shop front is because it's a call and response that he has with his superiors. Also,
Mm.
with the regime, where um, he's expected to put out those slogans because it is reinforcing the regime, and it's reinforcing that everything is normal, everything
Mm.
is okay in the
So it's like
world.
towing the party line. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So
So, so it's detached from its actual meaning.
yes.
Right.
So you know what? I might like. I know you directly asked about problematicity, but
Mm.
um, I might use normalization in order for you to understand what problematicity is.
Okay. Please.
And
Please.
it might sound counterintuitive, but
Yeah.
maybe you might understand if I kind of work backwards.
Okay.
So so that's sort of the regime justifying itself rather than the ideals justifying the regime.
Yeah.
So Vaclav Havel, when he talks about normalization, it's kind of um, it's kind of caught in this part of history where it was leading up to the Velvet Revolution. Because what you have to understand in Prague itself, as well as the Czech Republic, is that in the 1956, in Hungary, that was quite close to that, there was goulash communism, which after the Hungary Revolution, there was, I would say, much more reform governments where they were like, yeah, instead of repressing our people, or at least bringing out the tanks in order to repress them as soon as they um, say anything bad about our regimes, maybe should kind of work with the people and be a little bit softer. This kind of ended up leading to the Prague Spring, which again was another watershed moment in Czech history, where you had Alexander Dubček's government that kind of followed suit from Hungary of at least liberalizing their regime. But as soon as this happened, um, things got a little bit too loose for the Warsaw Pact troops' liking, and Russia came in and kind of shut everything down. And for a good 20-year period, um, the solidarity of the Shaken, or at least, Jan Padoka, Vaclav Havel's people kind of remained underground. And it was another watershed moment, which was the late 1970s. There was this really famous rock band in the Czech Republic, which was called the Plastic People of the Universe. And they were arrested just randomly because they were playing rock music. Actually, no, they did actually speak out against the regime. But once this happened, it was a cascade of moments that kind of led to the Velvet Revolution, and therefore the abdication of the Soviet Union from the Czech Republic. Now, the rest of the plastic people of the universe is what Vaclav Havel says led to people recognizing what normalization is, as in the Green Grocer hanging the sign up of Workers of the World Unite. It was this watershed moment of people realizing that they're living within a lie, as he likes to call it, which
Okay.
is, oh, I'm actually just doing things in order to keep my head down and not actually speak out for fear of my family, for fear of what I want. Because Vaclav Havel talks massively about, the difference between a Soviet regime and a classical dictatorship is that um, they have their fingers in all different pies across the Eastern Bloc, and people are willing to reinforce the system in order to uh, uh, not rock the boat, if you will.
Yeah.
And because of that, he says that people live within a lie.
Mm.
And what normalization is that it's this basically this game theory esque situation where just keeping your head down and not saying anything controversial, where if you do say something, um, you can lose your job. Your kids don't get the right education that they should deserve.
Yeah.
Things basically being stripped away from you
Mm.
um, means, that the simple right of being able to say what you want and move where you want. You're kind of reinforcing the regime, and then that leads to problematicity. Now, because of that normalization, uh, what basically Jan Padoka says, and this is what leads to Charter 77, which was the culmination of the solidarity of the Sheikh and being like, hey, actually, the Czechoslovakia Soviet Union regime, hey, you actually signed all of these UN agreements saying you shouldn't contravene like a person's right to free speech or a person's right to religion and stuff like that. Maybe you should actually do what you said you were going to do. And
Mm.
problematicity is being able to point out the wrongs within a system and the wrongs within society, and you removing yourself of living within the lie but actually exposing the truth, and you seeing what is the problem within society and kind of being true to yourself.
So it's like being woke. Like,
Oh.
like I don't mean that in like, no, I am being sarcastic, I'm not gonna lie. But like, you know, like in jest, and like, because, I don't know how else to describe it, but like, I'm sure this is much more sophisticated, the topic that this person is talking about and the
Yeah.
application of it. But like, generally, it's like being woke. It's like kind of, I've woken up to the craziness that is the world that we live in, and I will try to awaken as many of you as possible so you can also see the lie that we live in and the problems of the system. But like, I will stand there and live out my work principles. Now I am awakened. Is that kind of it?
I guess that's kind of the point of the Charter 77 is,
Well, not Charter
um,
77. I'm talking about problematicity.
yes. Um,
It's almost like the 1970s version of being woke in an Eastern Bloc country fighting off
well,
the evil Soviet Union.
look, it's a framing, but it's not in an inaccurate framing.
Yeah.
Because like another term that they talk about um, is the hidden sphere, and what they mean by
What's the
that
hidden
is,
sphere?
um,
This is all
I
really good, like conspiracy theory, like lingo. Can I just say, like, it's so good. It's just like,
well, look,
the
but
hidden
no, but
sphere. It's
yeah,
great.
but the funny thing though is that philosophers also love to do this. Is that what they'll do in their kind of premises that lead to their conclusions.
Yeah, yeah,
They love to use very specific terms to
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
talk about general concepts.
yeah,
And what he talks about, which leads to the problematicity idea, is that, well, if you are true to yourself and you go about your daily business, um, it's something as simple as, hey, I work in a beer factory, and I think we should update our processes in order to in order to produce our profit, or at least our productivity tenfold. And I think we should
mm,
do this by changing things X, Y, and Z. Um, maybe your superior might have a problem with that because it's not him suggesting it's you. Because you have just gone about your daily life in order to improve things, and then as soon as you've rubbed up against this regime that
yeah,
doesn't like to be questioned, then eventually you will see what is plainly something that is reinforcing itself for itself sake, and
yeah,
what
yeah,
is something that actually has some substance.
yeah, yeah.
And uh,
So like,
problematicity is not.
using that beer factory kind of
Yes.
analogy.
Yeah.
Um, So, like, if you were to suggest something and like it was not your place to suggest an improvement, you would be undermining the system, and that would be
Correct.
problematic because that should be coming from someone maybe in the managerial class or an engineering sector in your company as opposed to you just a lowly worker. And so by you suggesting something that you think is, beneficial, it's not beneficial to the system. It might be beneficial to operations, but it's not
Yeah.
beneficial to the social order. And so by you being uh, helpful and suggesting things, you're actually undermining how society functions. So that's,
or or at least how that specific society and
oh,
that
that,
specific regime views
mm,
society, not how society should be.
right, right, right. So like part of this is then like a big part of this is not just identifying it, but is actually like playing it out, living out those principles as an act of rebellion.
Yes, because Havel as well as Padoka felt like you going about your daily life under these regimes. Naturally, if you are an authentic person or somebody that is wanting to do something better for their fellow man, then eventually you will develop a dissident attitude. You will develop a rebellious attitude against this regime,
Yeah,
which I guess eventually happened with the regime turning around to, you know, the Plastic People of the Universe were a very popular band around the time in in Soviet Czechoslovakia, and that's the reason why it was such a watershed moment because people were like, "Oh, by them addressing them, they're saying that freedom of expression is bad. That people talking about and speaking their truth is bad,
mm,
and it caused a lot of civil unrest. And to be completely honest, it's not the first time that this sort of thing occurred because I think that halfway through the video essay, I do discuss the 2,000 word manifesto, which
hmm
was a scathing critique of Soviet Czechoslovakia around the time of the Prague Spring. So um, people were critical of Soviet Czechoslovakia around the Prague Spring. It's just in the Prague Spring scenario, the Warsaw Pact troops were successful in repressing that liberalization movement, whereas in the time of the Velvet Revolution, they were unsuccessful because that was around the time that the Soviet Union fell.
mm. I want to take it back to something that you kind of, or a concept that you were talking about just before about like, continuing your daily life, but like, not being oblivious to the fact that you're living under a lie and stuff like that, and making small steps to kind of change that, and therefore maybe enacting a larger change within the system. There's like this really famous quote that you see thrown around on social media by people that think they're really enlightened and everything, or think they're woke. And like they throw it around like they have full understanding of um, social commentary and politics and all that sort of stuff. But
Mm.
it's a good quote nonetheless. And it's the idea, or the quote is something along the lines of like, the only thing necessary for evil to exist or evil to win is for good men or good people to do nothing.
Yes.
So it's more about the concept of like there are evil people out there and there are regimes out there that are able to institute, total control, totalitarianism, or authoritarianism. But like they only got there because good people or people that were able to challenge them at the right time, I guess you would say, were complacent or like didn't do their jobs. So like evil and like, oppression can be checked by people who just need to pull their finger out and not sit back idly and let these things unfold without being checked at all. Because like that's what it means to be in kind of like a free society. You're not going to not have psychopaths. And you're not going to not have people that want to control everything, right? Those people just exist. And so like they need to be able to express themselves, but like that's as far as it goes. You shut it down through active debate, you let them air their concerns and you let people consider what they have to say, but you don't let it get out of hand because like you should be able to get involved and out debate them or just oust them by some means instead of just letting their hate kind of grow into this entire movement that just takes everybody by surprise. And then before you know it, you're living a complete lie and you're like a slave to the system.
Well, yes, and plus, I kind of feel like what you described there is a scenario that's kind of played out in, such movies like V for Vendetta, for example. And I kind of felt like discussing problematicity and normalization is a good follow up for from what we were talking about like last episode with militant particularism and the idea of once you do have a set of ideas and you do have an ideology,
Mm,
if you let it abstract itself, the bigger it gets, almost to the point of oblivion, then you do get such regimes as the one that these activists, or at least these dissidents, lived under, where it got to the point of they felt like, um, oh, uh, because that was the thing about Jan Padoka and his philosophical teachings, is that, well, in his lifetime, he saw the extremes of the right and the Stalinist left of and he was a critic of not only liberalism but also Nazism as well as communism that he saw, which was the Stalinist version. And as far as he was concerned, he was all about checks and balances within society and making sure that people's ideologies, or at least people's concepts of systems, do not get out of control. Because um, if we let it get out of control, we get such things as the Jewish Quarter in Prague, or you get um, uh, tanks streaming down to Winchester Square, where they dissipate people within the Prague Spring, and tell them to get lost and stop speaking their mind. And I thought it was a good idea to kind of bring up uh, Prague and the Czech people, because they had lived in that kind of vacillating world, if you will.
and I think that goes back to, what I was talking about before with that quote. Like sometimes the only thing that, well, like that really stops the spread of these of bad ideas or evil ideas, if you want to use um, that subjective kind of description of something. The only thing that can stop that is like, good people checking it at the right time and before it
Mm.
gets out of hand. And I think it's a really good and important topic to kind of, or concept, sorry, to try and get a hold of, especially if you want to at the same time honor something like this Charter 77 that you've been referencing, which is about like enabling people to have freedom of expression. And, with that would probably come ideas akin to it, like, freedom of speech as well. So, like, in order to, this is the complex issue about living in a liberal society, okay, or a free society, is that you have a lot of contradictory elements in the society that are like a foundational to it. So like rights that people have, like your my right to individual freedom, where does that stop? Well, it stops. Like individual freedom, if you think about it, should never stop. You should be free to do whatever you want. But like you are restricted in your freedoms stop or end where somebody else's starts. So there is a contradiction in the idea of individual freedom in a free society. Like if we all lived like by ourselves out in the desert or the bush or something like that, then you could literally do whatever you want. Like all the time, and it wouldn't really annoy or affect anyone. But like in a
Mm.
liberal society, it's full of these kind of contradictions and boundaries and stuff like that, even in a concept like individual freedom. So like your freedom, like my individual freedom, you could say, would be like if I felt like murdering you for IS because you annoyed me, then I should be able to do that. That's my don't step in and curb my freedoms. But like that would be an attack on your individual freedom, right? So like there is a
Yes.
boundary there between our freedoms, and like it's contradictory because it negates the idea that I have individual freedom, but like it shouldn't encroach on yours. Now, those kind of there's multiple layers and layers of these contradictory freedoms in a free and liberal society, which comes down to this idea of freedom of expression. And like freedom of expression is important because you want to let people air out their evil ideas. You want to be able to hear that. It's when you start suppressing people's, like, I don't know, yeah, ideologies and their rhetoric, that they then band together and form little groups in order to kind of perpetuate that and maybe take over the system so their voices can be heard. You want someone like, I don't know, neo-Nazis or something to be able to express themselves in some form of a platform so they can be openly ridiculed in public and like, debated in public about why what they're saying is just absolute garbage. But like you have to allow that stuff to happen in a society that allows free speech and freedom of expression. Like I'm not saying that you should allow them to physically do whatever they want. I just discussed, the idea of where my individual freedom starts and yours starts, and mine ends, and all that sort of stuff. But the idea of having freedom of expression is important, even though it seems to be contradictory to the idea of kind of living in a liberal society where people are allowed to exist. You have to be able to have situations where people can express themselves openly. And I think that will actually negate some of the stuff that you've been explaining here, where you have a regime that can take over to such an extent where they control every facet of somebody's social existence in such a complete way as to have people not realize that they're living in a lie, and like they have to go through some, absolute mental gymnastics or become part of some underground organization in order to become awakened and learn that they're living in a lie, and then have to try and spend the rest of their time waking up their brethren and the rest of the people in their community. That is like a
Mm.
crazy a bunch of events to have to go through, when it could have very been simply been cut off at the beginning by allowing everybody to express themselves and other people just stepping up and doing the right thing at the right time and cutting it off when it was necessary, as opposed to letting it get out of hand and like getting out of control.
Yeah, but I also think that what's important with the lessons that Jan Padoka takes us through, as well as Vaclav Havel, is that they are all about addressing the contradictions within society and taking those contradictions head on. Because, no matter what sort of society you have, there's going to be contradictions, and almost to the point where there's going to be contradictions that it relies on in order um, for it to exist. Like even the capitalist liberal societies that we work that we live in,
Mm.
there are foundational contradictions. Is that you do have ideologies like, for example, the American dream, or hey, um, even the Australian dream to a certain extent of having your 2.5 kids and living in the white picket fence in the suburbs,
Yeah.
but you having such contradictions like, you know, Airbnbs, big companies or wealthy people owning, 10 or 12 different homes because they want investment properties. And at least the ideology that, housing is a right, but the profit motive makes that sort of contradictory feeling butt heads and almost impossible for everyone to have said right or more specifically said privilege
Hmm.
obliged to them.
But like that's a systematic problem. So there's a problem with the
Yes.
system there. Like it is not able to control greed and supply the like actual use values to society. Where what we were
Yes.
talking about before is not just like a problem with the system, but it's an actual form of indoctrination. Like the system is set up in such a bad way as to give certain people 12 houses and everyone else struggle just to buy a house to start with. And like for people to realize that the system was set up like that in the first place, that would be the awakening. And they'd be like, oh my God, I've been living in a lie. The system's actually set up like this. I don't think that capitalism is set up in a way like overtly anyway, that like we are indoctrinated to think that there's enough housing supply. And like it's like, oh my God, wow, I've been living in a lie when, you actually have all these people that control like a small amount of people that control a large amount of the housing supply. I don't know if people are actually indoctrinated to think that everything's all fair and balanced when really it's not. I think everyone actually acknowledges the fact that how crap our capitalist societies are at actually supplying everyone with housing and use values and stuff like that. It's just actually a systematic issue. Like the fact that we can't see beyond that though, and we can't call it out though for what it is and say, well, this is a problem of the capitalist mode of production and we need to address this. That's a form of indoctrination because people just can't see a way out of that. They're just like, oh, well, it sucks, doesn't it? And it's just like, well, what are you going to do about that? And they're just like, yeah, well, it's a problem. Like that's a form of indoctrination. But I don't think people have to be awoken to this idea that like we're in a housing crisis. I think most people are aware of that.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say that it's a form of indoctrination where, okay, obviously in the Soviet Union capacity of things, like, oh, you believe that workers of the world unite, otherwise we'll bring in the tanks. Like,
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
that is a very overt sort
Very
of
overt.
indoctrination.
Yeah,
You either listen to what I have to say, or I'll throw you in the gulags.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
obviously very explicit.
yeah.
However, is it not a well? Wouldn't you also say it's a form of indoctrination of, it's the classic quote of people. People envisage the end of society before they envisage the end of capitalism.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's so like, wouldn't you say that that's a form of indoctrination that it's better to live with the devil that you know rather than the one that
Yeah,
you
and
don't?
I did say that. I said that like it's a
Yeah.
form of indoctrination because people can't actually like they know it's a problem, but they can't see past it, and they're just like, oh, it's just the way it is, man, like kind of thing. That is a form of indoctrination. But like no one's waking up from a lie there. There's no Matrix moment where they're just like, oh my God, like kind of thing, and they have to, you know, relearn how to live. Like I think people are fully aware of the problem. Like they just don't have a solution. They don't have a solution. And like they're not able, because of the indoctrination generally, they're not able to think that there would be a solution to that. That's the real indoctrination. Is that they're like, there is no solution to any of that. And like, this is the best we're going to get, so we might as well live with it. Because capitalism is the highest form and nothing will ever beat it. Ta-da! Like,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
just like,
indoctrination. Yes.
yeah, it's just like the reason why I felt this was a very interesting topic is that the normalization aspect to it of, oh, you kind of you believe this or else. yeah, okay, it's not a perfect one-to-one to the Soviet scenario, but I just kind of felt like uh, the capitalism slash, uh, live within the profit motive slash live within the coercive laws of competition.
Mm,
Like it's either that system or nothing else. Um, it it's kind of those sort of it's not a perfect puzzle piece to how this thing is structured, but it's somewhat is in the ballpark, and you feel like those sort of elements do influence the way we kind of live today. Like,
mm.
sure, uh, what's the other classic quote that people love to use? That if voting actually did anything, we wouldn't be allowed. Uh,
Yeah, they'd make it illegal.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good point. Um, like I think that's a whole nother topic. I think we might do a whole podcast episode on that. But like, you know, what is the point of voting? Like, like, do you actually get involved with the system and try and enact some change in the smallest way possible? Or do you just, s- abstain from the system altogether? The ultimate question of like the conscious leftists out there. Um, and I think it's a great topic that we should cover in another podcast at some point. But like, are you suggesting that voting is a form of indoctrination then?
Uh, Look, what I would say is that if we truly had a progressive voting system, I might tease this out if we do end up doing that
Yeah, yeah,
episode,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
believe that look, you can have your working politicians and your career politicians work
Mm,
in whatever your House of Representatives is, and that sort of thing. If we truly had a progressive system, I believe you keep your House of Representatives um, the way it is, but then you
mm.
set up a lottery system for your Senate, and you have ordinary working people that are part of the Senate, and like ju- uh, jury system, you have ordinary people that look through the laws that the working politicians put through, and they actually determine, oh, is this a good law or not? And
Yeah,
then they are the
yeah,
ones that pass it.
yeah. Yeah, that'd be a great system, wouldn't it? Like, yeah, let the pollies do what they want to do in the lower house. Let them go for it. But like they get stopped in the upper house by just regular
And
citizens. Yeah, that'd be so
yeah,
good.
and then also something that you've suggested previously, if we really wanted to have a progressive voice to Parliament, then also part of that Senate, you designate specific senators that are from the various mobs throughout Australia.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that'd be interesting too, wouldn't it? Because there's two worlds out there in Australia for us and for our Australian audience. Those of you who are listening, you guys would know there's two worlds in Australia. So like, yes, I think there should be representation from both of them. And like, yeah, that's such a good system. That would be hilarious. And like, it'd make some really good reality TV. Could you imagine like just ordinary citizens that have been just like selected by lottery for the day to decide on policies? Just be like, what the hell is this? How the hell do we vote on that? All right, everyone, all those in favor? No, everyone's off? All right, great. Motion not carried. Suck that, lower house. Yeah, I'd watch that. I'd watch that all day. Yeah.
Well, anyway, we're massively off topic, but yeah, I
Can we do the synthwave art, please? Because what the hell is that?
okay. You know
What
what?
is
Yeah,
that?
let's. We've got on a massive tangent, so we might as well finish up here. So this one is Vaclav Havel taking off with his parliament.
Oh,
So
okay. I
that
thought this was
actually
like a
is a
comment. Yeah, right. Okay.
no, no. That actually is Vaclav Havel.
Okay.
and yeah, for some reason
Right,
there's
right.
planes in the
Well, I
background.
was going to say,
So yeah,
is this like, is that the CEO of Boeing or something like that? All those planes going down in the background? Is that a door flying around in the background somewhere?
no, that
Like,
actually is Vaclav Havel. So
okay, right. And is it like an
Vac
accurate depiction of him as well? Is that what he looks like?
it's actually Vaclav, should I say? I
Yeah,
always
is that?
I always mispronounce his word. So sorry to all the Czech people that are listening in. But yeah, that actually is a photo of him, or
Yeah, right.
like it's actually got him quite well, to be honest.
Yeah, nice, nice. Okay. All right. Well, I take it back. Very far away from the CEO of Boeing, then I'm sure.
Okay, well, this might have been a bit of a podcast episode that was all over the place, but I felt like it was a good discussion.
Yeah,
So
we
we'll
need to
end
have
things.
these. Yeah.
We'll end things there. So remember, everyone, to keep thinking and keep learning. And to sign us off, I'll give it to you, Mr. A.
Thank you very much, 4AS. And to all of you people out there, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.